This is part 36 of my series on my Engage Model Railway project. Previous parts cover the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part deals with building tank wagons from Peco kit KNR 167. I picked up 4 of these kits and decided to build each of them slightly differently rather than making 4 matching wagons. This is what comes with the kit. The tank in 2 white plastic parts, the supporting frame also in white plastic, the chassis as a single piece in black plastic, plus 2 ladders in black plastic, 2 tensioning wires in what I believe is carbon fibre, and a bag containing the couplings, axles, and the notorious Peco micro attachment nuts, plus a fold-out card with some rather basic instructions. Perhaps you can see the contents more clearly in this picture, or perhaps not. Here's my first attempt at assembling one of these kits underway. If you've done one of these yourself, you may be able to spot my mistake here. I have assembled the chassis and frame and painted the frame, but I've got the tensioning wires on wrongly. Each of these wires is essentially 3 sides of a rectangle. I thought when I first unpacked one of these kits these would be very fragile, which of course they would be if they were made of plastic, but in fact they are very tough. I think they're made from carbon fibre. I've superglued the free ends of the wires here into the holes at the top end of the ends of the frame, that's where they're supposed to go, but I've got the horizontal pieces of the wires on top of the frame. That's wrong, they're supposed to go into the little grooves on the bottom of the frame. The instructions don't really make this clear at all. Fortunately, because of the toughness of these wires, this wasn't as big a problem as it might have been. Rather than trying to unglue either the frame or the wires, which could have got very messy and unpleasant and potentially destructive, I just snipped the horizontal portion of the wires in the middle and then bent each side back and inserted the ends where I'd snipped them into the grooves between the frame and the chassis. You wouldn't think that would work, but because these wires are, as I say, very tough, and it does work, and they also flex and spring back perfectly straight. I spray painted the tank of this first kit silver, mounting it on 2 toothpicks to do so. Here's the tank on the chassis with the tensioning wires now in their correct grooves. The weakest part of these kits is the ladders, which unfortunately are far too thick and clunky for scale. But I guess making simple straight wires from carbon fibre is one thing, and very good. Making the ladders that way wouldn't be feasible, at least not at a reasonable cost, perhaps not at all. And making them from plastic, they more or less have to be fairly thick. I guess the other alternative might be X-brass, but I don't know whether that would look a lot better. Here's the other side of that wagon. I only put 1 ladder on. I filled the hole for the attachment of the ladder on the other side, not too expertly, I'm afraid. Here's a bit more of a close-up. I used diluted enamel to dirty up the wagon. I should have used acrylic, as some of the silver has been removed. Still, I wasn't too displeased with the overall result. As I say, I decided to try to do each of these 4 kits that I had differently. For the second one, I filled the holes in the tank made for the attachment of the ladders on both sides. I did a bit of a better job this time, gluing in little pieces of styrene rod rather than just trying to fill with putty. Then I sprayed the tank matte black. I assembled the frame with the wires in the right place this time and painted the frame brown to simulate wood. Here are those 2 wagons together. I used black thread to make hawsers for the black wagon, wrapping it tightly round the tank and then supergluing it underneath, which was actually a bit of a devil to do. It's very hard to get the thread into position and keep it there and under tension whilst you superglue it. At this point, I definitely say that I feel the black one looks better. For the third one I went with green for all the upper parts, similar to wagons for transporting acid that I had seen. Of course, really there should be quite extensive lettering, which I don't really have a way to do. Here are the upper parts after the green paint has dried. And here's that wagon fully assembled. I did put both of the ladders onto this one. Here's the last kit in progress. I took slightly more detailed pictures of the assembly of this one. Here you can see how the wires fit into the grooves on the bottom of the frame, which is here upside down. I've held the wires in the grooves using a piece of masking tape whilst I superglue the ends into the holes in the end of the frame. The two rectangular lugs that you see at each end of the bottom of the frame fit into the coupling pockets in the chassis, pressing the couplings down to keep them horizontal in their resting position. The two round pins further in are to attach the frame to the chassis. The instructions tell you to attach the frame to the chassis by screwing the tiny nuts provided onto those pins. All I can say is good luck. I do not think this is a very sound arrangement. I do try to put the nuts on, but I don't really rely on them. I glue the frame to the chassis and then try to put the nuts on using needle nose pliers. I also put liquid poly cement onto the pins before trying to screw on the nuts. I never succeeded in getting a nut onto one of these pegs properly with the peg dry. With the pegs softened with liquid poly, the nuts can be screwed on with care, but it's very easy to accidentally twist the pegs clean off. It doesn't really matter much so long as the frame and chassis are properly glued together, although this does mean that you can't readily take things apart to replace couplings. Here's the view from the top, showing how the tensioning wires go into the ends of the frame. In reality, of course, they would go right through and have nuts on the end for tensioning them. This is how I actually glue those wires in place. I hold them below with masking tape, put the ends into the holes where they belong, and then apply a tiny drop of CA glue using a toothpick. I do quite a bit of my gluing using toothpicks, as you can place a small amount accurately like this. Of course, this will only work so long as the CA you are using is not too instantly setting. Here's the frame assembled with both wires properly in place. Now the tank with its ladders has been put onto the frame. This doesn't even really need gluing as it snaps into place. The ladders also have little lugs on the bottom, and those fit into holes in the chassis. For this kit I decided to paint the whole upper assembly silver metallic first. The instructions for the silver paint that I used said to allow a week before overcoating, so I dutifully left this sprayed assembly for a week, and then I sprayed a coat of transparent acrylic over the top to fix the silver before the next step, having had problems with the silver stripping on the first kit. Here are the first three wagons in a train behind a Fairburn tank engine. The fourth was still waiting for the silver paint to cure at this point. Here's that train going over the viaduct past the yard, itself in evolution at this point. The other three wagons are things I picked up from tiny railroads in Tilsonburg, plus an LMS brake van on the rear. And now with flash. I can never come to a resolution as to the respective virtues of flash and non-flash pictures. Here's the upper part of that last kit after spraying of the acrylic over the silver. And another view. The metallic effect is not bad. The extensive riveting cast into the kit tank helps. The lines round each end of the tank actually represent straps holding the tank down, although this doesn't really come across very clearly. I painted this one with a deliberately imperfect brown finish over the silver metallic, and then I mixed in some thin black. I wouldn't say the result was entirely successful, but I don't hate it. I had in mind a preserved beer wagon that I had seen when doing this one. I still feel the ladders are the greatest downside of this kit. The wheels and the couplings, by the way, seem to work quite well so long as you fit them correctly. The couplings are not sprung and may not always couple easily, especially if you let any dirt get into the pockets whilst assembling the wagons to the chassis. So I finally had all four wagon kits finished, and here they are running in a train. I like the black one best and would probably go more in that direction if doing more of these kits. They should really have some markings on them, of course, running numbers, warnings, etc. It's difficult to add those details when building from a kit. I mean, the only way you really could would be decals, and even then it's not easy to get the decals and to apply them. Still, I found it interesting working with these kits, and I'm quite happy to see the results running on the layout.